Anyone who's attended one of my trainings before know that I can explain everything much better if I can do it through chocolate. So let's think about these layers as caramel M&Ms. Got it? So if we think about that outer layer, that position, imagine that you were an alien and you had just beamed down from your spaceship. Okay, you have never been on this planet before. You have never had a caramel M&M before. I really hope that's not true because these things are magical. But let's say you're an alien and it's your very first time seeing a caramel M&M. So you pick it up, right? You examine it. And what do you notice about it? Well, it's tough, right? It seems like it's got this impenetrable shell. It's very bright, very bold. You might even try it. I mean, it's not that great, right? It's not that delicious. Here's the key. If you don't know what a caramel M&M is, right? If you've never had one before, you will assume that tough outer layer, that's bold, that's audacious, but it's not that delicious. You would assume that that's the whole thing, right? That it's like a jawbreaker, okay? So that's what people see when they just see us communicating with our positions, right? If we just walk around all the time and say, I want those reports to be done. I need you to finish this. I need you to do a better job on that. I need this to happen. I want this. Okay, it just seems like we're that tough outer layer, right? That we're just being bold and tough and that we're trying to look powerful. But it's not really that sweet, right? It's not that nice. It's not something that you really want to spend time with, okay? But we go a layer in. Now we're at the interests, right? You have to break through that first layer. In other words, you have to be able to read between the lines, or you have to create a safe enough space where people will let you pass that first layer, or you have to be vulnerable and let people in, right? So somehow you've got to get through that position, that outer tough layer. Now we're reading a little bit between the lines and we find out it's actually pretty sweet in there, right? It's much softer. It's much easier to interact with. It's just easier to work with. And what you notice is that you walk away from this wanting a little bit more, right? There's something sweet. There's something wonderful about it, okay? So the idea here, you see the allegory that I'm going for, right? When we communicate with people, often we communicate with our positions, right? That tough outer layer. This is what I want and this is what I need. But it's really ineffective, okay? The only way that we can really get to know someone or have them want to do what we're asking is if we're willing to open up a little bit and explain why. This is why we need this report at this time. Or I have a great example. I was working with a company a few years ago, and they brought me in because they were just noticing that there was this quiet quitting going on, right? There were just little issues that were popping up all over the place. They didn't seem to have a common thread, but people were just noticing that it was becoming more and more toxic, and they just weren't showing up for work anymore. So they brought me in, and I found out that a lot of their frustration was that the finance department just told them, you're not getting your raise this year, right? They had received an annual raise every year, but this year they weren't. And so, of course, people start questioning, right? It'd be like, I'd go over to Andy's office and I'd say, Andy, what in the world? Why aren't we getting a raise this year? I thought we did a great job. And then I'd go to Michelle's office. I'd say, Michelle, I think I worked harder this year than ever before. Why aren't we getting a raise? Or I would head over and talk to Stephen and say, Stephen, I just don't understand. What can we do better to get our raise, right? So the whole company is frustrated, feeling like they don't have an answer. Finally, the finance department came back and they were willing to be vulnerable, right? And they broke through that position layer and they shared their interests. And then the department told the entire company, hey, we have 2 major stores right now. We're trying to save up for a third. So we're asking you to forego your raise for this year, and then you can buy in and be part of an ESOP program, right? Have partial ownership over a third store that we're trying to raise money for. In other words, if you're willing, sacrifice a little bit now, and then you get more later. Okay, and now they've shared their interest. Now the entire company's on board. Like, yes, why didn't you just tell me that? Of course, I'd be willing to do that, but the company had to be okay with sharing some of their interests, right? Being a little bit vulnerable. So when I'm talking about positions and interests, that's really what I'm looking for there, that people are willing to take an extra step, right? Absolutely, this takes a little bit more time. I understand that. But the amount of time that you save down the road with all of the confusion and eventually the gossiping and the backbiting and the, well, why didn't I do this? How come she didn't say it this way to me? Well, how come he wanted that? I don't understand, right? You prevent so much of that down the road by just taking the extra 2 seconds in the beginning of sharing some of those interests. Okay. We're all on board so far. That makes sense. All right, cool.